Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 47 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got a few animals returning, we've got some cool cosmetics, and we've got some pretty cool new species that we haven't managed to talk about yet, so I'm quite excited to get stuck into those ones. So we're going to be starting off today with a remake, or kind of a new animal that's become a new species. We have got Camptosaurus by Netraptor and Pokemon Fan 2750, or 2750. So here we are, Camptosaurus. Very, very cool animal. Let's have a look at you, since you got such beautiful light, and you're a better color than blue, because I don't like blue in my dinosaurs, to be honest. But look at this wonderful Camptosaurus. So Camptosaurus, which means flexible lizard in Greek, this is a plant-eating ornithischian dinosaur. So it is an early relative of things like the hadrosaurs and iguanodontids, things like that. They are known from the late Jurassic of Western North America and potentially Europe, which is quite interesting. And you can see here they're like a relatively heavily built animal, and they've got robust forelimbs and quite broad feet as well, and back limbs as well. And they still have 4 toes, which is quite interesting. Due to its separate status from Euetodon, it's quite hard to tell which specimens are from actually Camptosaurus or Euetodon. But there's a few that have been pretty much confirmed, and they come from the Oxfordian age of the late Jurassic. And the largest fragments state that the largest individuals, or largest adult individuals, got about 7.9, or about 26 feet long, and about 2 meters, or about 6'6", at height at the shoulder, with some getting smaller, and some estimates putting them just under a ton, pretty much. And in terms of its history, it was first discovered on September 4th, 1879, where they found the remains of this guy. And then the same year, Othniel Charles March described the name as Camptonopsis, which means flexible back. But then it was obviously changed later on to flexible lizard because of naming conventions and things, which is quite interesting. Then it basically got redescribed and all that, and it's become basically the species Camptosaurus the pretty much now. Though some people call it Camptosaurus spar, so that's pretty much, and maybe a couple other species as well, but still really, really cool. There is also the first confirmed European remains of Camptosaurus, actually just found in 2022. They were described with a single specimen coming from Spain, which has some vertebrae, things like that, and it's been tentatively placed in the genus of Camptosaurus. So it could potentially be something else, which is quite interesting. So yeah, very interesting dinosaur if you read on that. In terms of its relatives, these guys are modern phylogenies kind of consider them in the clade Ankylopalexia, which is a basal kind of before a lot of the later iguanodonts and hadrosaurs, which were more derived, and then contemporaries such as animals such as Othnilosaurus, Dinker, and Dryosaurus, which is quite interesting. So quite early in that evolution. So quite a bit earlier than things like Euetodon, Hippodraco, things like that. So pretty interesting and pretty important in the evolution of dinosaurs. It's in a very important place. Very awesome dinosaur. It's got a bit of a taxonomic history because it was described by Marsh. Obviously, the bone wars happened, and then everything got a name, and then people have just been sorting that out, really. But yeah, really, really cool. And also, was some of them were moved to the new genus Euetodon, so that's quite interesting. Yeah, Netraptor really did a wonderful job, and so did Pokemon Fan, bringing it into a new species. But yeah, a really, really awesome mod. Definitely a big fan. So we'll let them walk off. But next up, we've got, this one is a very interesting one. It's Ceratosaurus, but this is a paleo edit or a paleo cosmetic for Ceratosaurus, done by Master Doot. You see, there's quite a few decent changes on this guy here, which is really, really cool. Let's have a look. We'll have a look at this one since he's in the best light. But you can see there's definitely been a lot of changes. Ceratosaurus has definitely been made a much smaller. A lot of the dinosaurs in the game are way too large for what they are. For what we know of Ceratosaurus, the largest Ceratosaurus specimens we have, they get to about 7 meters long or so, and about 2 meters tall at the hip. So much smaller than they are depicted in the game. In fact, if I brought one out to show you, that it'd be like standing over it. It's like half the size. But this is much more accurate to what a realistic or what we know of Ceratosaurus. And you can see some of the biggest changes to the head as well. So instead of looking like just a T-Rex with a horn, these guys had a very interesting skull. It was quite long and like tall, and they had these very large teeth. It's often exaggerated because of tooth slippage, and most likely these would have been covered by lips, but it's kind of how it looks. Really interesting jaws there, because these guys are ceratosaurs. Very cool. And then they have these very cool 3 horns, which are very charismatic to these guys, or characteristic of these guys. Really, really do love it, and the keratin as well. You can see that big horn was kind of showed off in the Jurassic Park one, but these two were not really showed off, so it really gives a much better look at the anatomy. Things like that. The skull's just much better anatomy. A little bit shorter neck, but yeah, well, I think a longer neck actually, much more shape. And they've got this very tall body, very big, bulky body. And then you have these arms, and like most ceratosaurs and later animals like abelisaurids and novosaurids, they have 4 fingers, unlike a lot of tetraneuron dinosaurs that include things like megalosaurs and spinosaurs and eventually tyrannosaurs. They had 3, and eventually some evolved 2 fingers and some evolved 1 fingers, but these guys were back when they had 4 fingers, so that's quite interesting as well. And you can see quite tall, interesting body. We also know that they had a row of osteoderms down the back, at least. That's been preserved. So, but this is quite accurate to having the osteoderms going all the way down the back like that, which is quite interesting. And there's some extra there for detail, but still looks really, really nice. I also love the skin as well. Quite cool. And you can see some change to the legs there. Just updated the feet a little bit because the dinosaurs, often have weird feet. And a little bit more bird-like. You can see there's extra keratin there, all the meat up on the thighs and things like that. And these guys had a quite large tail, as you can see that's portrayed here. It was often considered that these guys may have been a little bit more aquatic to niche partition within the Morrison Formation, but that's very unlikely now. But still really, really cool. Very interesting animal. Did love Ceratosaurus. Yeah, really awesome. A really nice paleo edit, and you can see these guys are not a new variant, so that's why they're all the same color. They're a cosmetic, so let me go to cosmetics, see Paleo Ceratosaurus. So if you want to go and click it, you just go like that, and you go view genome library, you go to your Ceratosaurus, should be just down here, and then you modify genome, and then it should be just in here. See, just right here. So nothing's changed, no dramas, that's just how you do it. Yeah, really, really awesome. I'm a big fan. I love these paleo edits so much, and I'm glad that people are getting really into them and making them their own cosmetics. Yeah, I love the head. Really, really nice. Very awesome Ceratosaurus. So we're going to let you run off and do your thing. So next up, we have got, this one's done by Game Videos for Life and Viral Cyclops. We've got an up as cosmetic skin for the Yutyrannus. There's one of the new ones coming from the Feathered Dinosaur pack, which I'm really excited to show off, so let's have a look at that. So this one, let's have a look at you, because you're probably the nicest posed. This is based off a very cool line of models by PNSO, which is a Prehistoric Animal Models kind of brand that out of, I believe, China. They make a lot of models and they do a really good job, especially the more recent ones, like the Meraxes. They've done pretty good jobs with those. They don't really add lips to them, to be honest, and that's kind of a little bit of a deal breaker for me. But I do have a few of their models, and some of them are really, really good. There's some really nice quality ones, especially of late. Yeah, this is their Yutyrannus, which a lot of people really, really liked. In contrast to kind of the colors from the base game one, it's a little bit more earthy tones. You can see on the model as well, it's got white along the face. And then you also have this orange and then transitions into a darker brown on the top. And the light is a lot more white on there. One thing that is wrong in both this one and in the original Frontier one is that the fur or the feathers should really come down right to the feet because we have it preserved pretty much right down there. And they had it actually right in the model, which is quite in the PNSO model. So that's one up that they've got. But yeah, really, really nice edit as well. And also more feathers on the face would have been nice. But really did translate well. And I know a lot of people like PNSO because they do some interesting skins and things like that. Especially the recent like Meraxes and the Giganotosaurus. I'm definitely a big fan of that. And I think these guys have come out really well. Nice to see some just more variation and nice to see some popular kind of skins and stuff being put on some dinosaurs, especially the feathered ones, because feathered dinosaurs have basically been all I'm asking for basically forever. So it's really nice to see them get some love. But yeah, so very similar to the Ceratosaurus. You just go up into synthesized dinosaur or genome library. You go right down to Yutyrannus, up down here, and then you can just go modified genome, and then you go through and you go PNSO. So yeah, perfect. Not really much has changed, of course, but a really nice addition overall. So let you walk off and do your thing. Next up, before we move on to the lagoons, we've got Eustreptospondylus, which is obviously quite a famous dinosaur for one very notable reason. So this is done by Hangswick T or something like that. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, but we've got a couple other mods coming from them, I think. But yeah, really, really awesome. So this is Eustreptospondylus, which is meaning true Streptospondylus. These guys are a genus of megapod or megalosaur, which is quite interesting. They come from the Oxfordian of the late Jurassic, so between 163 and 154 million years ago, and come from southern England at a time where Europe was actually a lot of scattered islands and things like that. So that's quite interesting. So a very interesting kind of habitat was portrayed when it was in Walking with Dinosaurs. It was first discovered in 1870, just north of Oxford, England, where they found the skeletal and the skeleton. And then it was the most complete for a while until like 1890, and referred it to Megalosaurus bucklandi. So it was originally Megalosaurus, and then it was split into Streptospondylus, and then that was split again, and then is now kind of considered Eustreptospondylus, which is quite interesting. The holotype was found in like marine layer water, so potentially what happened was the animal died and then got washed out to sea, or could have been swimming and died. It's actually a rather complete skeleton with some really only some like minor elements missing, such as lower arms, end of the tail, things like that, and is known from a subadult individual. So the individual was found was not completely fully grown yet, which is quite interesting. But the main specimen was found was not fully grown and has been estimated to be about 4.6 meters long, about 15 feet long, and weighing just over 218 kilograms or 481 pounds. And estimates of the adult size puts it about 6 meters and about half a ton or something like that, just comparative. So not too huge. So it's a subadult, so it wouldn't have done too much growing, but like 6 meters is probably a decent size for it. The skull of it as well is actually rather pointed from the side view, as you can kind of see there. And there's kind of like a large horizontal oriented nostril. And there's no lateral horn as well. And quite similar to Streptospondylus, they have paired anapophonies, if you say that, on the other side, which is quite interesting. And there's been some distinguishing traits that are mostly in the bones that like a lot of I can't really explain because they're all covered in flesh, but you can see it's a very interesting animal, and I really do like it, based on the Cryolophosaurus model itself. In terms of what it's related to, they assigned Eustreptospondylus into Megalosauridae, which was historically in Carnosauria, which was a big group in itself. And they're in their own separate family of Eustreptospondylidae, recognized. And it's generally considered Eustreptospondyline, which clades within Megalosaurs. So it's kind of, you have your Megalosaurs, and then you have your Spinosaurs, and you go into Megalosaurs, and these guys are a really basal Megalosaur. And then they evolve up into Megalosaurus and Torvosaurus and Ichthyovenator and things like that later on, which is quite interesting. In terms of paleobiology, these guys were carnivores like most other theropods or most other megalosaurs. These guys would have been eating all sorts of dinosaurs and smaller pterosaurs, also fish, marine reptiles, especially in their habitat. It may have been living along shorelines, things like that, considering where it lived was very much like scattered islands. And there also is known from a fossil where an island, so that when Europe was mostly archipelagos, so they may have been able to swim short distances and even was considered a good swimmer and strong enough to swim island to island, very similar to Komodo dragons, and that's how they were portrayed in Walking with Dinosaurs. And not all paleontologists agree with this hypothesis, or most others think it was most likely swept out to sea, which happens to a lot of other fossils. So either interpretation's kind of cool, but it's just is how it is. And there were people claiming that these were an example of insular dwarfism. So when animals get lost on islands, they kind of shrink down and become smaller. Though that's pretty much been disproven by the holotype being a subadult. So it could have been a dwarf, but we don't really know because we don't know how big the adults get. It could basically be the same size as any other megalosaur, so we don't really know. But yeah, really, really cool. So that was done by Wish Tree, I believe you say that. Obviously, I'll put all the links to the mods in the description so you can have a look. But yeah, this is very interesting. Like, I like the model itself. It looks quite nice. But the skin's really weird. It looks fake to me, but I guess it's just people making what they want. I still think, like, if it was just more blended, a little bit more, like, harsher, it'd be all good. So, yeah, pretty cool. So, I'm going to let that go off and do their thing. So, next up, we have got, in the lagoons, we've got Prognathodon. It's really, really cool. So, it's model of the Chronosaurus. So we're going to have a release. This was done by Magini, I believe you say that. So let's release. So here we have Prognathodon. So a very, very interesting animal. So these guys are at extinct. Let's see if we can get a good... Oh, you look alright in that angle. Just make sure we get a good lighting. Oh, you look a little better. That's probably a little better. Let's see. There we are. That's perfect. So this is Prognathodon. Very, very interesting. These are an extinct genus of marine lizards, so they're a mosasaur. They clade within the mosasaurine family, so they're related to like Mosasaurus itself and Clydestes. And its name means four-jaw tooth, which comes from the Latin pro, which means earlier, nathus, which is jaw, and odon is tooth. So it's basically the four-jaw tooth, which is quite interesting. These guys have been found pretty much all across the world. They've been found in the Maastrichtian and Campanian, from Middle East to Europe to New Zealand and in North America as well. And due to the sometimes being great differences between different individuals, and incomplete specimens. There's been quite a few species described. Whether they're valid or not, or even they could be new genera, is kind of neither here nor there. But some species have been obviously put into other genera, such as Dolosaurus and Brachysauria, for example. But yeah, they all kind of look similar-ish to each other. So they were first described in 1889 by Louis Dollo, which the specimens were gathered in Belgium, and they were called Prognathodon by obviously the four-jaw tooth. That's why they got the name. And the first later use of Prognathodon was by Dave A. Russell, which was in a comprehensive monograph of kind of North American mosasaurs. And then basically as more specimens were described, especially over like 2012, things like that, people have been looking and either splitting them into different genera or naming new species, things like that. But yeah, these guys were still a very interesting mosasaur. They were one of the largest bodied mosasaur genera, with the largest one exceeding, at least the skull was exceeding about 1.4 meters or about 4 foot long. And despite its massive size, they're pretty fragmentary, and there's very few specimens known with articulated skulls and things like that. And some species, like P. giganteus, could reach up to about 10 meters long, with an estimated maximum length for even some like 11 to 12 meters long, because obviously fragmentary remains, there's lots of differences and estimates and things like that, so I would take it with a huge grain of salt. And while there were some species that were quite big in size, there were many that were smaller, with some reaching about basically 6 to 7 meters or even 8 meters. So, and maybe about a ton, with the larger ones getting about like 3 tons, or even, I would say that's even pretty slim, maybe like not 15, but 10 tons or so. Going to be comparable to like a killer whale. But yeah, things like that. There's estimates. Estimates with such fragmentary remains are never like quite steadfast. But yeah, other than its size or robust nature, one feature that also kind of defines these guys is that they have a very interesting scleric ring, which protect the eye as well. And some of them have been partly preserved as well, and which is quite cool. And as a skull, one of the defining features for Prognathodon is that they've got very robust skulls that shows that these guys most likely had very powerful jaws and very large jaw muscles. So they would have been probably adapted to like biting things and very much almost like a crocodile, just biting into hard things, being durophagous, so feeding on potentially sea turtles, ammonites, things of that nature. Very similar to like globidens as well, which is another mosasaur. And in terms of their dentition, they are variable. Some species have like very different teeth, especially like P. sovani has the most different teeth. They have quite strong crowns and also the more procumbent teeth that are at the back, which is quite interesting. And it reveals that these guys may have been like prismic, had like prisms in them, which is quite interesting. But yeah, there's variation, as I mentioned, there could be different species, things like that. Some have more standard teeth, some have more bulky teeth. Just depends on the species or specimen even that you're looking at, which is quite interesting. And what we do know is that there's mostly skull material and isolated teeth found, but there have been some found with like dorsal vertebrae and things like that. There's even a specimen found with skin found at Jordan. We have soft tissue morphology from these mosasaurs, which is really, really cool. The fossil is not only largely complete and tisculated, which is quite rare, they also have a lot of integument. And they show that the soft tissue outline of the fin of the back here, which often mosasaurs used to be reconstructed with like a long eel-like paddle tail. And this was one of the specimens that kind of gave us evidence that they actually had very much like a shark fin kind of thing going on, very much like an ichthyosaur or a shark, which is really, really interesting. And this helped provide evidence that they were convergent with things such as whales and ichthyosaurs and thalattosaucians and things like that. With the tail fluke being asymmetric with this long lower lobe here, that's really used for swimming. It's because it's on the Chronosaurus that it flaps its like front flippers, but you could have just added the model onto the Tylosaurus, but it'd be fine. But anyway, this goes along with a lot of other well-preserved kind of platycarpus specimens and having great scale preservation, which has like the really small scales as well, like rhomboid scales, which is quite cool. And yeah, that makes them quite cool. In terms of their, as I mentioned, classification, these guys are in the Mosasaurian family, so they're related to other mosasaurs, including Platycarpus as well. And it also depends on which species, because there's obviously a lot of people split them. And there's lots of different sadly genera. There's some that even aren't in Mosasaurinae, which is quite interesting. So there's likely very much, maybe even 4 or 5 genera within Prognathodon, I mean. So there is a few species found from all over the world, some from Belgium. The local one that we have in New Zealand, which is distributed or former species, we have Prognathodon wyparensis, which was known for a partial skeleton. And a lot of these have been either put into other genera or lumped into other species. So it's really something that's kind of needs to be figured out. It's one of those things. So in terms of paleoecology, these guys have been found pretty much all over the world, as I mentioned. So they most likely, we've even found one with a large and a small fish in its stomach, along with a cephalopod and a sea turtle. So it pretty much shows that these guys were eating hard-shelled foods like ammonites, things like that. So very likely that they were eating whatever they could get their mouths around, really. So they were adapted to crashing those like kind of hard-shelled prey. And the teeth are actually quite high relative to the size of the skull. That shows that they may have been impaling their prey rather than like crushing or grasping it, which is quite similar to killer whales. So they may have had more of an ecology similar to killer whales and a hunting method very similar to killer whales. And one thing as well is these guys display heterodonty or kind of similar teeth because they're like other mosasaurians. So these guys probably had teeth that are all pretty similar. And they were kind of in between. They were kind of like consistent with mosasaurs with cutting and crushing teeth. So they weren't that specialized. Things like globidens, which basically has crushing teeth, which is like round. But they would have been more like in the middle of road. So they wouldn't have these really highly adapted crushing teeth, but they wouldn't have also had those really, really sharp teeth. It was somewhere in the middle, just being able to pretty much eat everything. They were on a seafood diet. They're seafood, they eat it kind of thing, which is quite interesting. And in terms of the taphonomy, the type specimen has really showed that these guys, they likely was killed by either age or disease, which is due to marine predators large enough to kill something of that size. So basically, the specimen or the type species, type specimen of Prognathodon saltatori basically died and was like, what's going to eat it? But then it was scavenged by sharks and things like that. There's lots of evidence they would have been scavenging as well. And we do have some with pathologies, some with injuries, like from fights with other mosasaurs, and shows that may have had like intra-Pacific combat or fighting within their species, things like that, which is quite cool. And is one of the cool things that you get to document about their behavior. Yeah, really, really interesting animal. I hope their taxonomy gets sorted. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, or even like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 species. So I think a lot of them are getting split into other genera, which is quite interesting. But yeah, really, really cool, interesting animal. Very fun to talk about as well. I don't know if we can get to talk about Prognathodon and Mosasaurs. So yeah, cool. We're going to let them swim off and do their own thing. Next up, we've got one from kind of a favorite on the channel. We've got Nothosaurus. This was done by Hawk Owl 1215. So we've got a wonderful Nothosaurus. Very, very cool. See if we can get one swimming out and get a good look at them in the sunshine. I'll have a look at you. You're quite pretty. Let you swim off. I think we'll look at you because you're in a pretty pose. But anyway, we've got the Nothosaurus. So this is very much more accurate to what Nothosaurus would have looked like compared to the Camp Cretaceous one. As we'll get into, these guys have like very, very long like head with these large teeth and very much more flipper-like than leg-like, which is quite interesting. But Nothosaurus, which means false lizard, these guys are from the late Jurassic, or Jurassic, I mean. They come from about 240 to 210 million years ago. They're a Sarcopterygian, so they're a relative of Ichthyosaurs and Plesiosaurs, like an early relative. But they're in their own kind of clade, and they were found from North Africa into Europe and China, so quite a wide range. These guys are believed to be semi-oceanic, so animals that probably lived like seals may have potentially been able to come onto land, but some evidence shows that they probably weren't able to, so it kind of depends. Some species get about 4 meters long, and they have these webbed toes, and they potentially had a fin on their tail, so that's kind of been represented here. Though some species could have got quite big, with N. giganteus or N. zahani got about 5 to 7 meters, or about 60 to 23 feet. And when swimming, these guys would have used their tails, legs, and webbed feet to kind of propel themselves and steer through the water. So probably like very similar to the later plesiosaurs. And you can see they've got quite a broad and flat skull, very different from the monotillid-like skull, the one from Camp Cretaceous had. You can see it's got that long skull and very, very big teeth, which basically would have been used to be like a trapdoor for slippery prey, such as ammonites and things like that. We actually have found fish that have been caught by Nothosaurs as well. And there's also been paddle impressions left by animals that, Nothosaurs that kind of dug into the seabed to try and get at animals in the seabed, so that's quite interesting. And in most body respects, you can see it is quite similar to those later plesiosaurs, but they were not quite as well adapted for those environments. And it's thought that one of their relatives, or potentially Nothosaurus itself, led to the lineage of plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, which were long-necked and short-necked kind of animals. The animals like Elasmosaurus and the Pleurodon, great examples. But yeah, quite cool. There's nearly a dozen species found from all across like Europe, North Africa, and China. But some of them could be different species, things like that, or different genera. But yeah, really, really cool animal. It's nice to have like both, because I know we want the Camp Cretaceous one, but the Camp Cretaceous one is obviously on land. This is like how Nothosaurus should be. It should be in the water. It's very much an aquatic animal. This was more accurate to the fossil record. And that's what Hawk et al. Kind of specializes in, especially with those feathered models. I still can't get over that feathered cosmetic pack. That was such a beautiful pack. But yeah, really, really awesome. Obviously, Hawk giving us a banger. So really, really cool. Nice to see a Nothosaurus. So we're going to let you swim off, do your thing, of course. Uh-oh. So let's get out of here. Had this issue before. Yeah, that's... Okay, we'll sort this out. Let's go. Next up, we've got... This next one's done by Daviono. We have got Ichthyovenator. So Ichthyovenator, very interesting animals. So Ichthyovenator is a Spinosaurid. Let's see if we can get... I'll have a look at you since you're probably looking the nicest light. There we are. You ran out pretty quick, didn't you? So Ichthyovenator, these guys are a Spinosaurid that was found in Laos, living between 125 to 113 million years ago. So lived in the early Cretaceous. They're found in the Greer Superis Formation in Laos, of course. It was first found in 2010. And it consists of a partial skeleton without a skull or limbs. And the specimen became the holotype of a new genus and species, Ichthyovenator laosensis, which is described by paleontologist Ron Allan in 2012. And its name means fish hunter, which refers to its potentially piscivorous or fish-eating lifestyle, which the name is obviously, the species name comes from where it was found in Laos. And it was in 2014, it was announced that more remains were found that include teeth, more vertebrae, and a pubic bone right from the same individuals. That's interesting. So the first fossils were found in 2010, as I mentioned, and they've been finding more, so they likely were quite piscivorous. In terms of its size, there's been estimates between 8.5 meters and about 2 tons, though some estimates have been putting a little larger, like potentially up to 10 meters and about 2 tons. And very similar to most other Spinosaurs, they had conical straight teeth, which was no serrations, which is very similar to other Spinosaurs, which allowed them to better able catch slippery prey. So rather than having serrations, these guys were basically just pegs trying to stick it through their prey, so they basically stay on their tooth and not swim away too much. Then you also see that they've got, very likely like other Spinosaurs, they've got elongated neural spines on the back here. And they seem to be divided into 2 halves there, which is quite interesting. It also has a little bit down the tail as well, so that really gives it a little interesting look to it. And the sacral sail actually continues from first caudal vertebrae, and then kind of go back there. And there's some people that have been reconstructing them recently, kind of with this paddle tail, very similar to something like Spinosaurus, which was recently found. And obviously being not complete, there's a lot of speculation there, so that's quite interesting. So yeah, classification. A lot of interesting traits from this guy. Basically issues like the dorsal and neural vertebrae, things like that. And the shrinking of the pelvis is actually relative. The pubis and ischium to the pelvis has been seen in both basal Cephalosaurs and Allosaurs. So that suggests that basically this trait may have evolved multiple times in different animals, so convergent evolution pretty much. And looking at its relatives, most people consider it kind of earlier Spinosaurian, because we have Spinosaurus, Spinosauridae, and you have the Brachionechenes, which is Baryonyx and its relatives. And then you have Spinosaurines, which include Spinosaurus, Irritator, Oxlania, things like that. This guy's kind of more basal, more related to like Simosaurus, which is quite interesting. So its potential Spinosaurus kind of lived around like Gondwana and into potentially Asia, while Baryonychenes kind of lived in northern Africa and Europe. So very interesting there. And in terms of paleobiology, there's been no skull of Ichthyovenator found. Very likely that these guys had a long snout, very similar to most other Spinosaurs, which looks very much crocodilian. And they would have used them to hunt prey, very similar to gharials and potentially other fish, other fish eaters, like gharials and herons and things like that. And there's also evidence they've been found of relatives like fish and things like that, been found in the diets of other Spinosaurs. But they've also been found like sauropod bones, pterosaur bones. So while they were mainly fish eating, they probably had a seafood diet. They're seafood, they'll eat it, and quite interesting. And also Baryonyx is found with a juvenile guanodontid found in its belly, so it's quite interesting. In terms of its sail, people have been looking at thinking they could be energy storage, kind of helping to better thermoregulate their body or control their body temperature. And some have been obviously suggesting sexual selection, which is kind of the most obvious one. The one with the biggest sail gets the most ladies, pretty much. But we don't really have any evidence for sexual dimorphism yet because we only have the one specimen. But yeah, they also most likely, like other Spinosaurs, would have had semi-aquatic lifestyles, so being in and around water, which is evidenced by oxygen isotopes and bone densities, things like that. So these guys would have potentially been evolving or moving towards a more a lifestyle that's more around water, so that's also quite cool. In terms of where it's found, as I mentioned, in Laos, which is quite interesting. It's found with a few other dinosaurs, like an iguanodontian, a sauropod, another sauropod called Dinosaurus, and a Neoceratopsian. Also been found with a bunch of different fish, like Leptodes, and a few other interesting animals as well. And it's very interesting that noted the discovery of Spinosaurids in Asia, as they were previously only known from Europe, Africa, and South America. And it's just there may have been like a faunal interchange between Laurasia and Gondwana in the south during the early Cretaceous. It's also possible that Spinosaurids may have been around from the the Middle Jurassic, and kind of just lived everywhere before Gondwana and Laurasia kind of split apart. So it shows that either there was some faunal change going on, or potentially Spinosaurids are much older than we realize. And plus, I think that's quite cool. We don't really know much about the early history of Spinosaurs, like with a lot of other species. We don't know their first histories. So that's something we can learn. I think it would be very likely that they could have been around the Middle Jurassic, which is quite interesting. And there's some people that have been suggesting they may have occurred across Pangaea before the late Jurassic, even if Asia was the first landmass to break apart. So it's kind of people wondering they could have come from Europe as well. It's just such spotty fossil record, we can't really tell 100%. But still, really, really cool. Daviono did a really wonderful job with this Neovenator. Really, really great job. So next up, this is one we technically already covered, but now it's a new species. This was done by Darth Summit 1980. We have got Neovenator. So we got here Neovenator, which means new hunter in Greek, and it is a genus of Carcharodontosaurian theropod. Oh, you want to have a look at you? Let's see if we can find one standing straight. Oh, you're perfect. There we are. So let's just hide the UI. Really, really awesome. So, there we are. Need to fix the bloody camera. Anyway, that looks about right. These guys are known from several specimens found in the early Cretaceous, or about the Birmanian, about 130 to 125 million years ago, in the Wessex Formation in the Isle of Wight of southern England, and is one of the best known theropods from the early Cretaceous of Europe. So the first bones of these guys were found in 1978 during a storm, found in Brightstone Bay, and now is pretty much found and these clays have been known from the late Cretaceous, early Cretaceous for a while, and then they've been found in, or basically put in the British Museum of Natural History, and then kind of the remains kind of within the Isle of Wight as well. That's quite interesting, and they actually found that these bones were from two different kinds of animals. So the Iguanodon was actually referred to Mantellosaurus, which actually was made into its own separate genus recently, Bryanstonius. And it's kind of very interesting, the taxonomy there. There's several amateur paleontologists kind of found several specimens to kind of add to what it looked like, and eventually saw their own species or own kind of species of Megalosaurus. Then it got its own name in 1996 as Neovenator, which means new hunter, which is quite interesting. In terms of its size, these guys were kind of a mid-size. I think I'm mixed up. I'm going to fix that because I've mixed up the camera. Where are you? There you are. That's better. So in terms of its size, these guys are about 7 meters long, or about 23 feet, and at a gracile build, probably about a ton, though there's some individuals that may have got it to about 10 meters long, though because it's only from a toe bone, and we're not even sure if it's from Neovenator. The various descriptions have a few different like traits to them, like the premaxilla being short. So that's one of the things, the characteristics that it separates it from others, things like that. And in terms of its classification, these guys were considered early on the only Allosaurid from Europe, but then further studies showed that these guys were a more advanced Carcharodontosaurid group of allosaurs, and several studies showed that these guys played quite well into that group. And even some have been suggesting they're more similar to Megaraptorans, so kind of early relatives. So sometimes they actually play closer to Megaraptorans together with the family Neovenatoridae. And other studies have suggested these guys may have been either Carcharodontosaurids or Megaraptorans or even Tyrannosaurids. So it really just depends on who you ask, really. The most recent, I believe, from 2013 shows that these guys were kind of an early-ish Carcharodontosaur. Like a slightly later than Allosaurus. But some obviously consider them Megaraptorans, things like that. Quite interesting. A couple of little things about this guy as well, where it shows that these guys may have had ISOs or integumentary sensory organs on their snout, which potentially very similar to modern waterfowl and crocodilians that allow them to find food in muddy water. So these guys had quite similar structures, and along with animals such as Spinosaurus, they may have actually used that to help sense like air pressure or also using it with courtship, like biting each other or sensing heat and things like that. So could be quite interesting for them. And we also know that with paleopathology, we have Neovenator. The holotype was actually found with some injuries, such as osteophyllus, which has included the phalanges. They've got gastria or belly ribs that were healed, and also false joints and a fracture of the scapula, which is pretty interesting. And its paleoecology, this guy lived in the Isle of Wight in southern England, and was from the Wessex Formation from the early Cretaceous. So it lived with some other famous animals such as Ceratosaurus, Rhipovenator, Baryonyx, Polycanthus, Iguanodon, and Eotyrannus. And also was the holotype bones was actually mixed in with the Iguanodontian Bryostoneus, but also there's also a lot of animals in the dig site found lots of amphibians, fishes, lizards, and pterosaurs, and gophophonids, which are a type of crocodile. And in this ecosystem, these guys are most likely like the tiger or the lion being the top predator in the ecosystem. So yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see this guy coming out. But last and certainly not least, we have got by Wheat. So this is a bit of an assortment here. I think we'll let them go off. So this one was done by Wheat, Pokemon Fan 2750, Viral Cyclops, and Aora 203 ITA. So this is, if you guys love Prehistoric Planet, you're going to love this skin. So this is kind of a paleo edit / kind of Prehistoric Planet skin. So we're going to have a look at this guy. So this is the first skin. There's two different skins. The first one is based on the one that you actually see on the show, Prehistoric Planet. So let's take a look at that. So for you guys that love prehistoric planets, such as myself, really, really awesome mod. I love these guys so much. But you can see here, very much similar to the show. Some of the changes that have been made in terms of paleo edits, just like a little bit of anatomy change, a little bit of a thinner neck. You can see these claws have been made quite a bit bigger. And just some overall changes to the outline as well, and also to the skull. The skull's been made a little bit wider, as you can kind of see here. Just made a little bit more accurate. Just fix up some of the little mistakes that are Frontier made on it, and then make it look more like the one from Prehistoric Planet. So you can see the wonderful changes. If you guys see Prehistoric Planet, I'm going to spoil it that there's a scene with a Deinocheirus kind of walking around the wetland, chewing on aquatic plants. Then it gets bitten by insects, has a scratch, and then scratches on the tree, and then poops. Pretty much that's the whole segment. But yeah, you can see it looks really, really beautiful. You get a pretty good look at it. I really like the colors there. I'll be honest, I think kind of the random kind of stripes there look a little weird. But even with just that and the blue on the face, I think it would look quite nice. But you can see those wonderful changes to the Deinocheirus. And I believe there's also a little bit of blue on the tail here. I think that really gives it, like, I'm not a big fan of blue on dinosaurs, but when it's a little bit, I think it works because blue is very hard to color to make, and usually it's all structural color. So not very many animals are blue or truly blue, and if they are blue, they use kind of the structure of their like scales, like um, blue morpho butterflies will have scales that reflect blue light, things like that. Usually it's structural rather than like actual pigment. So yeah, it's still quite cool though. I really, really like how this one's come out. Wheat always does a wonderful job. Wheat's kind of like the CEO of that, and this goes well with his other stuff. He's done the prehistoric planet Tarbosaurus, things like that. Looks really, really wonderful. So this is the first skin, as I mentioned. A little bit different, a little bit lighter. This is pretty much the one that you see in the show. So we're gonna let them walk out, and then we're gonna compare to the second skin. So the second skin here is skin B. We'll go through. So this is skin A. Let's have a look. Skin A. So 70 million years ago, skin A. So this next one is skin B. So you can see the difference there. Definitely a lot darker, almost like black. And you can still see those stripes there. A little bit more, not quite as much blue as well, which I think looks a little bit nicer. I think if it's just had the just blue, basic brown would look perfect on the original one, but you can see the nice flecks of color there, especially from a distance. You can see it's much darker. They don't have that blue on the tail. And the anatomy is obviously mentioned still pretty much the same. See the contrast there. But so yeah, if you want a slightly darker one, I believe this one is more on the show, but the concept art, there was some concept art of it making it look a lot darker. So I think that's kind of what they've done here. But yeah, really, really interesting. We'll let you have a good look. Look at these beauties. So you can compare there. So it's got a little bit more color to it and with a little bit more blue. These guys are quite a bit darker and emo. I'll be honest, I kind of wish there was a mix. I like the kind of color of this one, the kind of brown. I don't really like the stripes. I guess it's kind of weird. It just looks like tacked on stripes like you would see on some older paleo art. But if it was just brown with some like blue, I think it would have looked nicer, in my opinion. But still definitely not bad. I really do love it. Prehistoric Planet is like the best paleo documentary to come out since Walking with Dinosaurs. And I would argue it's even better than Walking with Dinosaurs. Don't at me. But yeah, really, really awesome. I really do love it. Really nice to see this guy in game. And nice to see some more paleo-accurate animals, and some also animals from great documentaries like Walking with Dinosaurs, Prehistoric Planet, etc., etc. Yeah, really, really awesome. So I'm going to credit again wonderful Wheat, who's like the spearheading the like paleo-accurate stuff. Like he's done some really wonderful stuff with also Pokemon Fan 2750, Viral Cyclops, and RTR 203 ITA. I believe how they say that. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of this video. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed the video as well. Click the little bell icon to get notified if I upload anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.